Just waiting for him to unmute the mic, I think. Is it? All right. Hello? Hello? There we go. Okay, we're going to get started in a few minutes. We're waiting for people to filter in. So if you guys could move to the center of your rows, if you don't mind, just make room for those people still filtering in so they can get on the ends. Thank you guys so much. We're going to get started in a few minutes. All right. Good. I love you too. All right, welcome. On behalf of the Evangel Michigan Tech Student Org, in partnership with Evangel Community Church, we're grateful to welcome Dr. Frank Turek to Michigan Tech tonight. So he told me not to read his bio because his mom is not here, so no one will care, but I'm going to do it anyways. So Dr. Turek is a Christian apologist, author, and the president of crossexamined.org, which is a ministry dedicated to helping people think clearly about faith and engage in meaningful questions about Christianity. For decades, Dr. Turek has spoken on college campuses across the country and interacted directly with students through live forums, and open Q&A sessions. He's also the co-author of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, and several other books exploring the evidence for the Christian worldview in clear and accessible ways. His passion is for equipping students to ask hard questions, examine their beliefs, and consider whether Christianity is not only meaningful, but true. So with that, join me in welcoming Dr. Frank Turek.
Okay. Good evening, Huskies. Just over 5 months ago, we were at an event in Utah, and we were flipping hats, and 15 minutes later, Charlie Kirk was dead. Is there any purpose to his life? What's the purpose? Glorify God. Where does it say that? Colossians 1:16. How do we know Colossians 1:16 is true? Look at the evidence. I like this guy. He just did? Well, you can't be saved unless you've read the book. Look, I don't make the rules, okay? But really, what is the purpose of life? Because, you know, if atheism is true, there is no purpose to life. I mean, if there is no God, there is no afterlife, there is no judgment, there is no standard, we're all going to wind up in the same place. In that sense, it doesn't really matter if you live as a missionary or a murderer, because if we all wind up in the same place, just out of existence, what does it ultimately matter how you live now? It might matter for a short period of time, but ultimately it doesn't matter at all, does it? Do you realize that everyone you love will die? Everything you build will crumble. Everything you say will be forgotten. Everything you do will come to nothing. You and your identity, whatever it is, will die and vanish unless the resurrection is true. Because if there is no resurrection, if there is no afterlife, if there is no God, if there is no judgment, it ultimately doesn't matter how we live. And everything you work for, everyone you know, everything you do will just come to nothing. So with that cheery opening, let me point out, I think there is a real purpose to life. I think Charlie Kirk's life mattered, and I think your life matters too. But we have to show it matters. We just can't affirm it. We just can't assert it. And I think you can show that Christianity is true by investigating 4 questions. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, if you investigate them honestly, I think you'll come to the conclusion that Christianity is indeed true. Not just true for me, not just true for you, but like true like gravity's true. It's true for everybody, whether you believe it or not. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Now that is some pretty grooving music, isn't it? Yeah, that's from our TV show, which is on every Wednesday nights on DirecTV and Roku, and it's streamed on our website as well. We're also on radio every Saturday morning, but it doesn't really matter if it's on radio because it's podcasted. In fact, we do 2 podcasts a week. It's called the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. And what we do is we present evidence for Christianity and we cross-examine ideas against it. And the person that actually writes up what's in the podcast is here. There she is, the great Amanda Jones. Where are you, Amanda? There she is, ladies and gentlemen. She came all the way from near Detroit tonight, which, as I understand, is only 36 and a half hours. Because what do you call it? You guys are Yoopers up here, right? You're Yoopers. We're like 200 miles north of Green Bay. When I tell people that, they go, what? Is it true that 60% of Canadians live south of here? Is that true? That's what I've heard. Anyway, Why are these the four questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. First question, does truth exist? Christianity can't be true if there's no truth, but you often hear people saying, there's no truth, all truth is relative, you got your truth, I got my truth. Look, if there is no truth, Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there is no truth, atheism can't be true either. Now, of course, there's truth, ladies and gentlemen. You wouldn't be at Michigan Tech if there was no truth. I mean, what are you here to learn? Opinions? No, you're here to learn truth. And of course, if there was no truth, you could never catch someone in a lie, right? Lies presuppose truth. I'm just going to spend a few minutes on point one tonight. I want to spend more of the time on point two, does God exist? Because Christianity can't be true if there's no God. Tonight, I hope to show you that the God we call the God of the Bible actually does exist. And you don't need the Bible to know it. In fact, we're going to look at three arguments for this being. These arguments are in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, you can establish that God exists without any reference to any religious writing. The third question, are miracles possible? A lot of people don't think miracles are possible, but I hope to show you tonight that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible, even atheists are admitting the evidence for. We'll see that tonight. Then the key question, is the New Testament telling us the truth, particularly about one event from the ancient world? If this event took place, Christianity is true. If this event did not take place, it's false. What's the event? Yeah, the resurrection. If Jesus really predicted and accomplished his own resurrection from the dead, then Christianity's true. If he didn't, it's false. It's simple as that. In fact, the Apostle Paul, writing to the church at Corinth, said, if Christ hasn't been raised from the dead, your faith is in vain. Do you realize that Christianity is a worldview you can investigate and discover whether or not it's really true by looking at historical evidence? It's not just someone's philosophy. You can see if this really did occur. And if it did occur, then you can show the entire Bible is the Word of God. Now, we don't have time to get into all that tonight. It's in the book. We're just going to cover point one and point two and then get to your questions. I think we're going to do Q&A. Well, actually, we're not going to do Q&A. I think tonight we'll do all Q, no A. All right? So everyone gets to ask a question, takes all the pressure off me. No, we'll go to Q&A a little bit later. We're going to start right here at point one. Does truth exist? You guys ready to go? All right, now whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand and he said to him, Colonel, I want the truth. And Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth. Only one guy got it right. The rest of you Huskies were weak. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. You can't handle that. That's not how he said it. Here's how he said it.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
All right, let's try that again. I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Now that felt better, didn't it? Didn't you always want to do that with some professor up here? Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. This is the relativistic postmodern culture we're in now. I think you can show that's false, this relativistic postmodern culture, by just investigating one law of logic. Unfortunately, we don't teach logic in public school anymore. In fact, how many people in here have had a real course in logic? Can I see your hands, please? All right, see these people with their hands up? These are the homeschoolers. There they are. See them? Right there. We don't teach logic in public school. If we did, things would be a lot better. Instead of teaching young people how to think, we're teaching them what to feel. And that can be dangerous because if you follow your feelings without reason or without moral restraint, you're going to wind up in a very dark place. Anyway, this law of logic is called the law of non-contradiction. It says opposite ideas cannot both be true at the same time and in the same sense. For example, God can't both exist and not exist at the same time and in the same sense. Either exists or he doesn't, but not both. Right? Either Jesus rose from the dead or he didn't, but not both. You with me? All right. What we're going to do is apply the law of logic to just a few of these statements we hear in our culture today. Like, for example, sometimes people might say this, there is no truth. If someone were to say that, you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yes, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because this is what is known as a self-defeating statement or self-contradictory statement. If this statement is true, it's false. Because it claims to be true while claiming there are no truths. It would be like me saying I can't speak a word in English. You would say, Frank, you're using English to say it. So when you come across a statement like this, if you want to show it's false, what you need to do is turn the claim on itself. Turn the claim on itself. At Evangel Church yesterday, we spent about 45 minutes doing this. We're not going to do that tonight. The video is up on their Facebook page or their website or YouTube channel. I just want to do this a couple of more times just so you can get the feel of it. Suppose someone were to say all truth is relative. What question would you ask that person? Yes, is that a relative truth? No, can everyone see that's an absolute truth, claiming all truth is relative? It violates the law of non-contradiction, which means it can't be true. Probably the biggest one in our culture right now is this: you ought not judge. In fact, Jesus said, don't judge. Why are you judging? You hypocrite. Put Jesus aside for just a second. What's the problem with this claim? Yeah, if someone claims you ought not judge, you might want to ask them, hey, isn't that a judgment? Or if we're not to judge, why are you judging me for judging? By the way, did Jesus say don't judge? Nope. Never said it. He didn't just say judge not. What did he say? Judge not, lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, you hypocrite. Notice that's a judgment, you hypocrite. Take the log out of your own eye first. Is Jesus telling us not to judge? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. Of course, I mean, it'd be crazy to say don't make judgments. You'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments just getting over here tonight. And now you're going, this was a bad judgment. This guy's crazy. No. Atheists make judgments. They judge there's no God. They judge Jesus didn't rise from the dead. They judge the Bible's not telling the truth. These are all judgments, ladies and gentlemen. So you have to make judgments, but you have to make judgments without being judgmental. As someone once said, that evangelism is just one beggar showing another beggar where the food is. Nobody in this room, nobody watching out there is going to get to God by being better than anybody else. The only way you're going to get to God if Christianity is true is to put your trust in what Christ did on the cross, because he paid our punishment, and by trusting in him, you're not only forgiven, you're given his righteousness, if it's true. And I think it is. But let me just sum up this section this way. Can everybody see that this statement right here shoots itself? Can everyone see that? Which means relativism and postmodernism are false because they claim it's true that there is no truth. So let's move on to the key question of the night. We know that truth exists. The next question, is it true that God exists? And I mentioned we're going to go through 3 arguments. Let me just introduce them here. The first argument for the existence of God is from the beginning of the universe. It's also known as the cosmological argument. And cosmological just comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. And it says if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, also known as the teleological argument. Telos is the Greek word meaning end or goal or purpose. And it means, this argument shows that if there's design in the universe and design in life, there has to be a designer. Now, these 2 arguments have some scientific evidence behind them, which is great for a tech school. But the third argument doesn't have any science behind it. It's more philosophical in nature. Yet it's the argument we've all intuitively understood since we were very small children. It's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says if there's one thing morally wrong out there, just one. Like it's wrong to torture babies for fun. Or it's wrong to rape. Or it's wrong to shoot someone in the neck who's just answering questions on a college campus. Then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard beyond humanity that we're all obligated to obey, that's just one person's opinion against another person's opinion. Now, we know that murder and rape and theft, it's not just a matter of opinion. It's really wrong. If it's really wrong, there must be a standard of really right out there that we're obligated to obey, and that standard can only be God's nature. Whatever we mean by God, what we mean is that moral standard, the supreme being of all justice, who sets what's right and wrong by his own nature. We'll get to that argument later, but we got to start here at the cosmological argument. You got to admit, it was worth coming here just to see God do that. Did you see that? Some of you said, I've never seen God move. Oh, really? Check this out. Look at that. Now, this cosmological argument is the argument that many say points back to the big. Now, I know there's some Christians in here going, Frank, you know we're Christians in here. We don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good that even atheistic scientists have admitted it. Stephen Houghton, who was probably the top physicist in the world until he died 7 or 8 years ago, put it this way. Almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Now, Houghton tried to come up with another explanation other than God. He failed, but he is admitting the data that space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing. Even agnostic cosmologists like Alexander Vilenkin, who teaches at Tufts University, put it this way. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup. Right, a cosmologist studies the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Two very interesting words in this quote from Vilenkin here, who is an agnostic. The first word is the word proof. Why is that an interesting word? Because science, by definition, is tentative. Because there's always new information that comes in, and sometimes it overturns existing theories. I know you can't trust everything you see on Wikipedia, but Wikipedia actually has a page on overturned scientific theories. There are scores of them, because new information comes in, right? But Vilenkin is so confident that the universe had a beginning that he's willing to call it a proof. The other interesting word is the word problem. Why is it a problem there was a cosmic beginning? Well, because if the naturalistic view is true, that there is no supernatural, how did all of nature come into existence unless there's something beyond nature to create it? You can't find a natural cause for all of nature. Years ago, I was at Oakland University, down the road here, way down the road. And there was a former Christian who became an atheist who was up at the microphone, and I was pointing out that the cosmological argument seems to point to God, and he said, oh, Frank, that's a God of the gaps argument. He said, if we give science more time, we're going to figure out a natural cause for this. I said, first of all, John, that sounds a lot like faith. Right? We haven't found it yet, but we will. That's a faith position. And secondly, it's not a God of the gaps argument. What's a God of the gaps argument? It's when you have a phenomenon you can't explain naturally, and so you plug God into the gap and you say, he did it. This has happened many times before. But why does it not apply here? Because there can't be a natural cause for all of nature. Nature was the effect. It can't be the cause. I said to him that night, I said, John, for you to say that if you give me more time, I'll figure out a natural cause for all of nature would be like me saying, if you give me more time, one day I'll figure out that I gave birth to my own mother. No, it's not even possible in principle. If all of nature had a beginning, what could have caused nature? If space-time and matter had a beginning, what could have caused it? Only something outside of space-time and matter. In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons can make choices. The cause would also have to be intelligent to have a mind to make a choice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? God. You say, well, how do you know it's the Christian God, Frank? We don't. Yet. I mean, this could be Allah or some other theistic or deistic God. But if we keep going through the questions and we realize that the evidence is there to show us that Jesus really rose from the dead, then we can go back to this argument and say the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,993 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. You don't get all the way to Jesus in any scientific argument, but you have 6 attributes which could be the God of the Bible from this one argument. Now, I'm not going to go through the scientific evidence for this. We don't have time. It's all in the book, chapter 3. But I want to show you one piece of philosophical evidence for the beginning of the universe that I think is irrefutable. Let's just take a look at this timeline here. Okay, here's the timeline. There's today right there. There is yesterday. There's the day before yesterday. There's last week. Let's say we don't know how far back this timeline goes. Here's my question. Can this timeline be infinite into the past? This is the interactive portion of the program. Why can't it be? Well, no, that's what we're trying to discover. How do we know it had a beginning? By looking at this timeline. How do you know it had to have a beginning? The Bible says, okay, that's true. The Bible does say that time had a beginning, but that's not where we're going here. You would never get to the present. Exactly. If there were an infinite number of days before today, today never would have arrived. Think about it. If there were an infinite number of days before this day, how could you ever get to this day? Because there's an infinite number of days. You'd always have to live another day before you got to this day. But today is here, so there can only be a finite number of days before today. You guys with me? You look like you have intellectual constipation. Okay? Just think this through. This is called the Kalam cosmological argument. This means that there was a beginning to space, time, and matter. If there was a beginning to space, time, and matter, back here somewhere, whatever created space, time, and matter can't be made of space, time, and matter. And if this being, whoever he was, created time, did he have a beginning? No. Which means he didn't have a cause. This answers the old who made God question. Nobody made God. He's the uncaused first cause. He's the uncreated creator. He's outside of time. He created time. So he is what Aristotle would call the unmoved mover. But we don't know if it's Jesus yet. All right? Let's go on to the second argument, because this second argument, atheists will say today this is the hardest one for them to answer. It's the teleological argument, the design argument. And it's got two aspects to it. The universe appears to be designed, and life appears to be designed. Let's look at the universe first. Scientists have discovered in recent decades that the universe is fine-tuned to support life here on Earth. If you were to change any one of a number of factors virtually imperceptibly about our universe or our solar system or the initial conditions of the universe, we wouldn't exist. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples right here. First, with the initial conditions of the universe. Stephen Hawking, again an atheist, put it this way. He said, if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. If you were to change the expansion rate at the creation of the universe, none of us would be here. That's how fine-tuned it is. You can't make any sort of evolutionary argument for this. You can't say, well, maybe it by chance evolved to a certain speed. No, why? Because it started at the right speed. Seems to me the same being that created space, time, and matter is the same being that fine-tuned that expansion rate to be precisely what it needed to be. Also, the gravitational force right now, compared to the strong nuclear force, is fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 40th power. Most of you here at Tech know this kind of scientific notation, but just in case you don't, 1 part in 1 to the, or 1 part in 10 to the 40th power is 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I, so let me give you an illustration. Take the entire North American continent, from Central America all the way to Greenland, the 51st state. And stack it in dimes all the way to the moon. That's 238,000 miles of dimes. And then do that on 1 billion other North American continents. Stack them in dimes all the way to the moon. Then take all those piles of dimes, put them in one humongous pile, mark 1 dime red, mix it in, blindfold a friend, throw them on the pile, ask him to pick 1 dime at random. The chance he would pick that 1 marked red dime is 1 chance in 10 to the 40th power. Is he going to do that? You'd have to have a lot of faith to believe he will. No, this makes absolutely no sense to think that this could happen by chance, whatever. By the way, chance. So maybe chance. Does chance cause things? Who caused this? Chance. He was just here. No. Chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. Chance doesn't do a thing. There's only two possibilities for this value being where it is. Either it was designed to be there or it wasn't. What makes the most sense? It was designed. And by the way, this is just one of at least a dozen of these about our universe. Change any one of them that imperceptibly, we are not here. Now you know why the atheists see this as a hard one to answer. That's why they come up with these crazy multi-universe theories to try and explain this away, which doesn't work. Not only are the initial conditions fine-tuned, the present conditions fine-tuned, but our solar system appears to be fine-tuned, set up in such a way so we could exist. So let's look at the solar system here for a second. Here we are, right here, third rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away, we couldn't survive. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It is. That's a lie. It's way too cold here. It hasn't stopped snowing since we got here. I came from North Carolina. Fabio came from Texas. Dave came from San Diego. He's going, you got to pay me double. Ty came from all the way from Florida. That's how much we all love you. It is pretty, though, isn't it? You guys are sick of it too, aren't you? Come on. It's going to melt by June, maybe. It's crazy. By the way, if our axial tilt was slightly different, 23.5 degrees, we couldn't live. If our Earth rotation, 24 hours, if that was different, we couldn't live here. The size and distance of the moon from us, if that were any different, we couldn't live here. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we couldn't live here. Why? What does Jupiter do for us? Yeah, its gravitational force is so strong that it attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. Saturn does the same thing. In fact, you want to take a close-up look at Jupiter? You know what these dark marks are? Those are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. In fact, you want to see the size of the planets? Check this out. This is order of size. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. And what if Pluto identifies as a planet? What then? You bigots. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Antares. It's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto? Forget about it. All right, keep an eye on Arcturus now. Where's Arcturus now? See it way over here? Right of Regal. That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse here, look, I don't name the stars, okay? If the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And this is just in our galaxy. This is not outside our galaxy. And the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles. All that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. How far is 30 trillion miles? Far. It'll take you at least 2 tanks of gas on a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. A number of years ago, my wife and I took our sons, when they were young, to the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get to go to Tucson, they have this museum out there. And if you go at night, if it's a clear night, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there one night, and the guide says, if we look up at 9:03, we're going to see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, oh, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle. It's only 150 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And we look up in the sky, and streaking out of the western desert sky is an object traveling relative to us like this. It's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up that the sun was still reflecting off of it. And we got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle. You'll be at 5 miles a second. Think about how fast that is. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle, assuming we could do this, and go from our star, the sun, to another star an average distance away 30 trillion miles if we could go 5 miles per second. How long do you think it would take us? At least over 1,000 years. 5 is a long time. You must be a math major. Yeah. It would take us 201,450 years just to go from our star, the sun, to another star in our galaxy, an average distance away, going 5 miles a second. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling from our star, the sun, to another star inside our galaxy, an average distance away, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years, you would be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. Dad, are we there yet? How about at light speed? You know what light speed is? 186,000 miles per second. How long would it take us to get to the next nearest star? Almost 4 years. There's no way we're going to do this. There's no way we're going to get to another planetary system. It's just too far and too dangerous. There's no way we're going to be able to do. Well, actually, let's suppose we figure out light speed and we do get to another planetary system. What I'm about to show you is a little bit disturbing, but I think you can handle it. Suppose we get to another planet in another planetary system, we plant our flag, and then this happens. Beans are not for astronauts, ladies and gentlemen. Now, to show you how analytical my wife is, I showed her that video, and then she smiled just a little bit, and she said, "That's illogical. There's no sound in space." Now, look what the psalmist says about the heavens. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. How high are the heavens above the earth? If it's going to take us over 200,000 years just to go between stars in our galaxy at 5 miles a second, how many stars are out there in the whole universe? Well, the Hubble Space Telescope helped us discover this way back in, I think it was 2003. They trained the Hubble Space Telescope on 1/26 millionth of the sky. What's 1/26 millionth of the sky? Go outside tonight, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice represents about 1/26 millionth of the sky. So they trained Hubble on this spot for 11 days of exposure time. I'm going to show you what they found. This is called Hubble Ultra Deep Field. You can Google this and find this little composite video they put together. It's in the public domain. I don't know if you can see this down here, but these are mountains. This is the southern hemisphere right here. When I play this video, you're going to see the constellations come up, and then Hubble's going to zoom out to that 1/26 millionth of the sky. There's no audio. It's just a bunch of video, a bunch of pictures put together. You guys ready? All right, here we go. Hubble Ultra Deep Field. What you're looking at are nearly 10,000 galaxies in 1/26 millionth of the sky. Each of these galaxies have billions of stars of their own. And in our galaxy, just to go from one star to another star, going 5 miles a second, will take you over 200,000 years. How many stars are there in the entire universe? Researchers at the University of Hawaii estimated the number of stars in the entire universe are about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth times 100,000. Now you know what the Bible means when it says the heavens declare the glory of God. Ladies and gentlemen, I never want to hear any of you Huskies ever use the word awesome again unless you're talking about the heavens or God. Awesome shot, dude. Awesome shirt, dude. Awesome TikTok video. No! What are you going to save for this? Now, we've got a problem. Because if this is supposed to somehow communicate to us God's nature, and it is, the heavens declare the glory of God, this means God is infinitely just. And that's a problem, because none of us have been infinitely just. And if he's infinitely just, he has to punish us, because he's infinitely just. But he's also, thankfully, infinitely loving, and he doesn't want to punish us. So what does he do? I only read the first half of Psalm 103, verse 11. Here's the rest of it. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. How has he removed our transgressions from us? The only way he can remain infinitely just and not punish unjust people is if he finds an innocent substitute who can take our punishment upon himself. Where is he going to find an innocent substitute in any one of us? He can't. We're all fallen. The only way he can find an innocent substitute is for him to be it. So he adds humanity to his deity. He comes to earth. He allows the creatures that rebelled against him to torture and kill him so he could take our punishment upon himself. And then by trusting in him, you're not only forgiven, you're given his righteousness. This is why at the memorial service for Charlie, I only had a few minutes, but all I said was, here are some of the great things Charlie Kirk has done. Charlie Kirk even sacrificed himself for his Savior, but that's not why he's in heaven. Charlie Kirk is in heaven because his Savior sacrificed himself for Charlie Kirk. This is the greatest story ever told, and it happens to be true. By the way, this is why Jesus is the only way. It's not an arbitrary claim. I'm the only way because I said so. There's no other way philosophically or theologically that an infinitely just being can allow unjust creatures to go unpunished unless he punishes an innocent substitute in our place. This is why Paul says in Romans chapter 3, verse 26, God remains fine. God's not going to force you into heaven against your will. If you don't want him now, you're not going to want him in eternity. Now, when you think of a universe that has stars equivalent to sand grains on 100,000 Earths, and it's going to take you over 200,000 years just to go between sand grains or stars in our galaxy going 5 miles a second, does that make you feel insignificant? It shouldn't. Why? Because as amazing as the heavens are, they're not made in the image of God, but you are. In fact, the heavens were made for you. This is the second part of the design argument. Your design. In fact, this is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? Human. In fact, let's go back even further than 11 weeks. Let's go back to when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some older people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. When your mother and your father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg to attract your father, and then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limping here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the 3.2 billion letter genome, your software program, your DNA, that makes you you. All the letters were in the right order. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other half of the 3.2 billion letter genome, your DNA, that makes you you. And when your egg and your soldier came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. You know, you have not received any more genetic information from this point till right now. Your genetic information has just duplicated itself. In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, wait a minute, Frank, you can't legislate morality. All right, no extra charge for this. This was the subject of our first book, creatively titled Legislating Morality. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite behavior wrong. You can't think of a law that doesn't legislate morality. The only question is, whose morality will we legislate? And when people say, don't impose your morality on me, I say, why not? Would that be immoral? Actually, the better answer is this. When they say, don't impose your morality on me, I say, this isn't my morality. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that murder's wrong, that abortion's wrong, that rape is wrong, that you ought not mutilate the genitalia of children. I didn't make up the fact that theft is wrong. I didn't make up the fact that men were made for women and women were made for men, and the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize that man-woman relationship over every other relationship. I didn't make any of this stuff up. This isn't my morality. This isn't your morality. This just happens to be the morality. The one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. Oh, by the way, the same morality the Apostle Paul said the Gentiles are not of the law written on their hearts. Look, if you have a problem with the morality, you don't have a problem with me. I didn't make it up. You have a problem with the Creator upon whose nature this morality is derived. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. From this point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. For most of you anyway. Some cells became brain cells. Other cells became heart cells. Other cells became lung cells. How did they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this very moment. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made a, knock it off. Are you thinking about this? Are you going, wait a minute, Frank, I got to concentrate. New red blood cells coming up. No, this is just happening. How is it happening? Aristotle understood something 2,400 years ago. Of course, he didn't know anything about blood cells, but he did notice that all of nature's going in a direction. For example, why does an acorn, if it's properly nourished, always go in the direction of becoming an oak tree? Why doesn't it become an elm tree or a birch tree or a seahorse? Because it's programmed to become an oak tree. Well, who programmed it? And by the way, is an acorn conscious? Is an acorn in the ground thinking, all right, what do I have to do to become an oak tree? No. but it reliably goes in the direction of becoming an oak tree. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, and it doesn't, yet it reliably goes in a direction, there must be an external mind directing it toward an end. This is what Aristotle called the unmoved mover. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 1200s and he said, this is going to be my fifth way to argue for God. That all of nature's going in a direction, so somebody must be directing it. Did you ever wonder why the natural laws are so persistent and consistent? Did you ever notice that all natural things change, but the laws that drive natural things or that govern natural things don't change? Where do laws come from? They come from lawgivers. Now, it's very important. This argument for God, it's not a historical argument. It's not like the Big Bang argument. Aristotle and Aquinas are not talking about historical causes. They're talking about a cause right now. Every single second the universe exists, it's being held together and directed by a mind. That's why we can do science, ladies and gentlemen. Because this is an orderly universe that we can rely on reliable cause and effect, and we can observe this reliable cause and effect. If there was not this sustaining cause right now, this universe would fall apart. This is why even in the Bible says about Jesus, in him we live and move and have our being. And Christ holds all things together. And the writer of Hebrews says God sustains all things by his powerful word. In fact, you can think about it this way. God is to the universe what a band is to music. If a band were up here playing music, it would be creating and sustaining the music. What would happen to the music the second the band stopped playing? Music would be over. Same thing with God. God creates the universe, and he creates you, and he creates the natural laws that govern the universe, and he sustains the universe, and he sustains you in the natural laws that govern it. That's why we can even detect reliable cause and effect. So contrary to popular opinion, science has not disproven God. Science would be impossible without a being like God. Now, there's much more in the book Stealing from God, which I'll tell you about later about that. But we got to go to our final argument and then get to your questions. The final argument for God is the argument from morality. There's more arguments in this. This is just the final one we're going to talk about tonight, okay? And maybe the best way to communicate this argument is to ask you a question. How do you know that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing an interception? How do you know? Not just the rules, but it's part of it. What do you have to know? What do you have to know about the game? Huh? Scoring, you're all around it. Not just the rules. How did we know it was good for the United States to score that goal in overtime yesterday? Because they won. What's the purpose of the game? Right? You got to know the purpose of the game to know that this play takes us closer to the purpose, but this play takes us further away from the purpose. If there is no purpose to the game, all you can say is the plays are different, but you can't say one is better than the other. Also notice that in sports, let's talk football for a second, the purpose of the game comes from outside the game. You know, when the Seahawks and the Patriots played the Super Bowl last month, they didn't make up the rules. They didn't make up the purpose. When they got to the stadium, everything was set up. Who made the purpose and the rules and all that? The commissioner, the owners, the competition committee, the referees enforced them. In other words, the purpose of the game comes from outside the game. Now, in football, the rules are arbitrary. Why? Because football could be different. You could make different rules. And every once in a while, they change the rules. Like last year, they said you couldn't tackle anybody. I don't know if you noticed that. But they said you couldn't tackle anybody. But they can do that because it's an arbitrary game. But in life, the purpose comes from outside the game, but the rules are not arbitrary, at least not most of them. Why? Because they come from the nature of the Creator. If there is no real purpose to life, you can't say it's right to love and it's wrong to murder. I mean, you can say it, you just can't justify it. Because there's nothing outside of yourself to measure it by. It would just be your opinion. If somebody comes along and says, I want to kill all the Jews and create the super race, why is he wrong if there's nobody beyond humanity? It's not. In fact, let's talk about that. Mother Teresa, the Catholic nun who died, I think in 1997, but most of her life she spent serving the poor in Calcutta, India. Of course, Adolf Hitler, the murderous dictator of World War II. How can you discover who's right and who's wrong? Well, let me ask you a question. Which of these maps of Scotland is better? What would you need to see to know which one was better? Yeah, you need to see a real unchanging place called Scotland to say that map A, while it's not perfect, is a better representation of the real Scotland than is map B. If Scotland doesn't exist, these two maps are meaningless. But since Scotland does exist, we can see map A is better than map B. In other words, we have an external standard to compare them to. That's exactly what we're doing. We're comparing Mother Teresa and Hitler. Mother Teresa's not the standard. Hitler's not the standard. There's a standard beyond both of them by which we measure both of them. And we say Mother Teresa measured up to the standard better than did Hitler. Where is this standard? Can't be found in us. It comes from outside the game. That's what we mean by God. Whatever you mean by God, that's what you mean by God. The standard of righteousness. In fact, you know what evil is? Evil is just degrading good. In other words, evil does not exist on its own. Evil is a lack in a good thing. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you got a better body. What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? You got nothing. In fact, you know what the problem with cancer cells? They're not concerned about the host. They want to take all resources from the host. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of a car, you get a better car. What happens if you take all the car out of the rust? You got a Pinto. Got to be old enough to know that joke, all right? In other words, evil does not exist on its own. It only exists as a lack in a good thing. But there can only be a good thing if God exists. Otherwise, it's just everybody's opinion. In other words, evil does not disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there. But there'd be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed. So if evil exists, God exists. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. You wouldn't even know what evil was unless there was a God, unless there was a purpose, unless there was a right way to live. You wouldn't know it. So, there's a lot more we could say about that argument and all these arguments, but I want to get to your questions. But before we do, let's sum up what we've seen. From the cosmological argument, we've got a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause. From the design argument, we also see more information that this cause is intelligent, and this cause is also sustaining the universe. From the moral argument, we can see that this being is also morally perfect. So when you put these three arguments together, you realize that there's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent, moral creator who created and sustains all things. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the God of biblical Christianity, and we haven't even opened the Bible yet. Again, we're not sure it's the God of Christianity yet because we don't know what happened with Jesus. But we have the attributes, several of the attributes of the God of the Bible without even opening the Bible. And by the way, the Bible teaches this. Paul says in Romans 1 that his invisible qualities are clearly seen so that we are without excuse. In fact, if someone were to ask me, why do I think that God exists? I would say this: I know God by his effects. If there's a creation, that's the effect. I have to reason back to a cause, a creator. If there's design, that's the effect. I have to reason back to a cause, a designer. If there's a moral law written on the heart, I got to reason back to a cause, a moral law giver. If there's evidence a man predicted and accomplished his own resurrection from the dead, that's the effect. I have to reason back to somebody who could cause somebody to first exist and then rise from the dead. You're always reasoning from effect to cause. In fact, we do this personally. If you think that, say, God has spoken to you somehow, maybe he's answered a prayer, you're doing the same thing. You're saying the answered prayer is the effect, and you're reasoning back to a cause. You're saying God caused it. This is what science is, ladies and gentlemen. It's a search for causes. You're always trying to find what cause caused a particular effect. That's what science is. And what is the queen of all sciences traditionally? Anyone? Yes, you are correct. It's theology. Theology is the queen of all sciences. Why? Because it tries to discover whether or not God exists, and then it tries to see how all of the academic disciplines fit under that one umbrella of truth. How does physics and biology and anthropology and psychology and every other ology you can think about, how does it fit in one big umbrella of truth, one big worldview? Unfortunately, many times in today's culture, we get very specialized on very, very narrow slivers of academic inquiry, but we often miss the big picture. Theology says, back out of that, try and get the big picture, and then you can make sense of the details. So, we know God exists by his effects. How do we know our miracles possible? I don't have time to cover this, but I want to just point out one thing. A lot of people don't believe in miracles. They think they're impossible, haven't seen them. But the greatest miracle in the Bible, even atheists are admitting the evidence for. What's the greatest miracle in the Bible? No, it's not the resurrection. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse in the Bible is at least possible. Because if God can create the universe out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants? It's not logically impossible inside the universe? Of course. Well, even atheists, I had Stephen Hawking up there earlier and Alexander Vilenkin, even they're admitting space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing. Again, they don't think it's God, but what else could it be? If Genesis 1:1 is true, miracles are possible. You say, why haven't I seen many miracles? Let me ask you a question. What is one of the characteristics of miracles? That they're rare. Because if they occurred all the time, we'd say, hey, these are like natural events. I mean, the rarity of a resurrection is what makes the resurrection special. So we go, oh, that's a special event. God must have done that. I mean, imagine if people rose from the dead routinely. What would the resurrection of Christ mean? Nothing. You go to somebody, hey, Jesus rose from the dead to prove he was God. And the guy goes, so what? Uncle George just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now we got to give the inheritance back. No. It's got to be a rare event. It can't be a regular event. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to be down at Northern Michigan, Lord willing. We're going south to go to Northern Michigan, okay? And tomorrow night, I'm going to cover, is the New Testament true? So you can tune in on the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, Cross-Examine YouTube channel, if you want to go further. But the bottom line is this life and your life matters. What is the purpose of life? Jesus told us when he's praying to the Father in John chapter 17, he's praying for us and he says this, now this is eternal life, that they, meaning us because he's praying for us, that they know God the Father and Jesus Christ whom you've sent. And then when you add the Great Commission, the idea that we're supposed to go make disciples of all nations to that, the purpose of life is to know God through Jesus and to make him known. That's what he was doing. Oh, you say, Frank, Charlie was too political. He wasn't my cup of tea. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you this. What is this? Anyone know what that is? That is a satellite imagery of the Korean Peninsula made up of a homogeneous population of Koreans. There's the 38th parallel. We fought a war over that. Look at the South. It's filled with light. It's filled with productivity. It has religious freedom. The North, on the other hand, is a concentration camp. There's one major reason for the difference between South and North Korea. What is it? Politics. It's politics. The South has political freedom. The North does not. Christians, if I ever hear somebody else say, all I do is preach the gospel, I don't get involved in politics, I say to them, I guess you don't think the gospel is very important. And they go, why? Because politics affects your ability to preach and live the gospel. If you don't think so, why don't you try go doing this in North Korea? We can't do this we can't even have this meeting in North Korea. There's no First Baptist Church in North Korea. I've been to several closed countries. I've been to Iran. There's no First Baptist Church of Tehran. I've been to Mecca. There's no Calvary Chapel of Mecca. I just got back from Egypt. You can't build new churches in Egypt unless you get government approval, and that's really hard to do. There's no Evangel Community Church in Cairo. Why? Because politically, they've ruled it out. And if for no other reason you ought to be involved politically is to protect your ability to live and preach the gospel. This is why Charlie would say politics is peanuts compared to Jesus. However, although it's not our first priority, it helps us achieve our first priority, which is to spread the gospel and make disciples. It's also important because you should care about your neighbor enough to put laws in place that protect him or her from evil. What's the purpose of government, according to Paul? To punish wrongdoers and protect innocent people from evil. If the government is not protecting wrongdoers, it's not doing its job. If it's not punishing wrongdoers, it's not doing its job. Too often we are protecting wrongdoers rather than punishing them. So not just Christians, everybody, whether you're a Christian or not, you ought to be concerned about politics because politics affects everybody's lives. Why shouldn't you be involved? So Charlie was brilliant at that. So let's point out that I did bring some books, and I want to point out all the proceeds from the sale of the books will go to feed needy children. Mine, okay? just so you know. Just so you know, all right? Actually, we sold a lot at the church yesterday, but after the Q&A session, we'll have some up here. We brought I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which argues for Christianity from the ground up. We also brought Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. That has a lot more in it regarding some of the things I talked about with regard to Aristotle's argument and Aquinas' argument. And it points out that when atheists try and argue against God, they're actually stealing from God to argue against him. They have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. One other thing. This QR code, if you follow the QR code, I'm going to send you the entire I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format and about a dozen other presentations. If that doesn't work, text the word evidence to 855-909-0582. 855-909-0582. Those folks watching on YouTube can do that as well. Also, we brought the book Hollywood Heroes, How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. If you know somebody that likes movies, they're going to love Jesus. Why? Because the top movie franchises of the past 50 years have all stolen from the greatest story ever told. Whether you're talking about Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman or Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. Harry Potter? Do you know that J.K. Rowling admits she took the story right out of the Bible? Yeah. So if you know somebody that likes movies, they're going to love Jesus, all right? As we go to questions, I want Rosario to tell young people here at Tech if they want to get more engaged in this kind of teaching or this kind of discussion, how can they do it? Go ahead, Rosario.
Thank you. Great, yeah. So for the students here, there's lots of student ministries to get involved in at Michigan Tech. InterVarsity, Navigators, Crew, Serve the King, His House, there's a bunch. You can find most of them on the Michigan Tech involvement link. If you guys don't know what that is, Google Michigan Tech involvement link. And then you can search for all kinds of different student ministries and get connected. Also, Evangel, every Sunday at 9:30 and 11, they have a bus that goes from Wads to the church. So if you don't have transportation, you can get to Evangel on Sundays and, like Frank said, hear more of this type of stuff. So yeah, that's all.
All right, thank you, Rosario. Now it's time for questions, and since no one likes to ask the first question, we're going to move right on to the second question. Second question at the microphone. You guys got to come up to the microphone to make this happen because people out there in the live stream land will not see it if you don't. So come on over for Q&A, and we'll start right over here with this gentleman. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Carson.
Carson, go ahead, sir. That's my grandson's name. Good name.
Nice. So you believe that God has creative power with his word?
What do you mean by that?
With his word he created, you could say.
Oh, you mean in the beginning God spoke?
In the beginning, God spoke.
Okay.
With his word there's creative power.
Well, he has creative power to speak, yeah.
With his word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I would ask, do you believe that his word also has spiritual creative power?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Because we're getting into dangerous territory.
So I guess I'm thinking about 1 Peter. He says, "You have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and abiding word of God."
True. God sustains us. Yeah. God is the one that created us and sustains us. But are you suggesting that when we say certain things that we have that same creative power? If that's what you're saying, the answer is no.
No, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
I guess what I have in mind is, how do you get from unsaved to saved?
You repent and you accept what Christ has done, and then you pick up your cross and follow him. And Paul says this, of course, in Romans chapter 10, where he says, if you believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord and confess with your mouth he's been risen from the dead, you will be saved.
Amen.
Yeah. So it's by grace, not by works. And of course, Paul says the same thing in Ephesians chapter 2, that you're saved by grace, not of works, so that no man should boast. It's completely grace. That's the unique thing about Christianity. You don't achieve your salvation like every other religion. You receive your salvation.
Right.
Christ does it all for us.
Amen.
All right? All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Carson. All right. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Henry.
Henry, go ahead.
I struggled with this question. I'm a Christian myself. In the book of Daniel, there's an angel that's delivering a message, and he's delayed 20 days by the prince of Persia, who's a demon.
Yes.
And I struggle with the question, how can a demon have so much power over one of God's angels?
Only the power that God allows him to have. God can use even demonic forces for his ends. So God allows demonic power, just like he allows us to do bad things. You know, he could take away our ability to do anything anytime he wants, right? This is why when people say, why doesn't God stop all the evil in the world? I normally say, because if he did, he might start with you and me. I mean, why do we always complain about other people doing evil? We say, God, why don't you stop him? God, why don't you stop her? God, why didn't you stop the shooter? Ladies and gentlemen, if God were to stop evil at midnight tonight, would you still be alive at 12:01? None of us would be. So, God has his reasons for allowing free will to be played out, but he's ultimately going to redeem the choices that we make. And for those of us that repent and want to follow him, we'll be with him for eternity. And those that don't want to repent, they'll be quarantined from God and the believers for all eternity. That's what hell is. You're quarantined, so you can't use your free choice to interfere with the people who do want to follow Jesus. So there's two places, two sections in eternity, smoking and non-smoking, and you want to be in non-smoking. All right? Does that make sense, Henry?
Yes, sir. But is there a meaning in the delay of the message?
That message in Daniel?
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to go back and read that whole context to see, but I know what you're talking about. I think it's just illustrating that there are spiritual forces out there, and we're in a spiritual battle. And Paul says the same thing in Ephesians. We don't fight against flesh and blood, but against these principalities of darkness. And so you say, but I know people who are doing evil. Okay, they're doing evil, but they may be being held hostage due to their own choices by demonic forces. They're still made in the image of God, and we treat them like they're still redeemable. And so we try and save them from it. It's not hate to say to somebody, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing and you should repent and follow Jesus, because if Christianity's true, that's the most loving message you could give them. But so many people who don't accept Jesus think you're hating them by disagreeing with them. If disagreement is hate, then they're hating us by disagreeing with Christianity. So the loving thing to do is to tell people the truth. In fact, Thomas Sowell, you guys know who Thomas Sowell is? Brilliant economist. I don't even know if Thomas Sowell is a Christian, but he's 95 years old now, and everything he says is brilliant practically. He says, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. How often do we tell people what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear? You know why we tell them what they want to hear? It's because we don't want them mad at us. You know what we're doing? We're sacrificing them for our benefit. When love says the opposite, you sacrifice yourself for their benefit. You reach out to them to help them even if they get mad at you for it. Make sense,
Answers
Henry?
my question. Thank you,
All right,
sir.
thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too, but don't tell me what to do. Okay. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Wyatt.
Hey, Wyatt.
So I'm just recently kind of getting into like the whole religion idea. I'm a little bit more. I believe there's a higher power. Like for the most part, I believe it's like God. But I'm also like a 75-25. Like I believe in God, but I'm also kind of a science-based person. When you were talking about the idea of the galaxies and how there's more galaxies than there are grains of sand on 100,000 Earths, my 25% kicks in and says that it is statistically improbable that we are the only planet with another form of life. But my friends and I, who are more on that religious side, say that there is no other form of life anywhere other than Earth. So like we kind of butt heads there. What's your thought process on that? Or like how do I like? I just feel like it's statistically improbable that we're.
Yeah, I think Christianity doesn't say anything of whether or not there are lives on other planets other than angels. But we're talking about organic life.
Yeah.
So we don't really know if there's other life out there, if there's intelligent life out there. I'm not sure there's intelligent life here. But I'm open to there being life out there. Didn't somebody just say, wasn't there something in the news? Didn't President Obama say, oh yeah, aliens are true? Did he say that?
He did, yeah.
Okay, but what he meant was UFOs are real. And you know what UFOs are? Unidentified flying objects. By definition, they're unidentified. Do we know what they are? We don't know. So could there be other life out there? Sure. It's not going to affect Christianity. If that other life is fallen too and God has a plan of salvation for them, fine. Maybe they're not fallen. I don't know. So, although years ago, a couple of atheists wrote a book called Rare Earth, based on some of this fine-tuning arguments that we've been talking about. And even with the vastness of the universe, their calculations revealed life doesn't exist anywhere else.
Okay, I want to read up on that.
Yeah, I don't know if they're right, because
yeah.
I'm not a math guy, but that's what they said.
Okay, thank you
All
so
right?
much.
Hey, thanks so much. Hey, Wyatt, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
I would, yeah.
If I gave you a book, would you read it?
Yeah, it's on my. I want to read like 3 books this year, so that's kind of on my.
Okay,
it's
good.
one of my goals.
I'll give you one later. Come up here.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Hey, what's your name?
Michael.
Michael, go ahead, sir.
All right, so I had like 3 questions. 2 of them are related.
Well, let's see. Let's start with one.
All right. So, while talking about the cosmological argument, you were saying that if the cosmological argument is true, therefore we must attribute specifically intelligence and personhood to the first cause. Why specifically must we attribute intelligence and personhood? There are tons of things that happen in the natural world that don't require intelligence or personhood, like a lightning strike. So why the first cause?
Well, because the first cause went from a period of nothingness or state of nothingness to a state of creation. And in order to create, you need to make a choice, because there was no nature as far as we know. Nature itself had a beginning, which would imply that the cause is outside of nature. Spaceless, timeless, immaterial. And by the way, impersonal forces don't make decisions. Like gravity doesn't say, you know, if Turek drops that thing one more time, I'm not going to pull it down to his hand, right? Or bend space-time, you know what I mean. Gravity does the same thing over and over again. It doesn't make decisions. And this is the interesting thing, that Stephen Hawking, the last book that he wrote called The Grand Design in, I think, 2010, he says this on page 181. This is a quote. To explain how the universe came into existence without God. This is what he said. Because there's a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Hello, McFly. What? Do you know what the esteemed philosopher, mathematician, John Lennox, who's a Christian from Oxford, said about this statement? That because there's a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing? Lennox said, when brilliant scientists talk nonsense, it's still nonsense. Gravity, first of all, didn't exist prior to the creation of the universe. Secondly, gravity doesn't make decisions. What gravity does is it describes how things happen once something's already created. It doesn't create anything in that regard. So, go ahead, go to the second part of that.
Alrighty. So this is a little bit different. You were talking about that God is infinitely just, and because of our sins and our misdeeds, we deserve to be damned, except for the fact that Christ saves us, obviously. But if God is infinitely just, wouldn't it also mean that God should infinitely reward us for the good we do?
He does. Yeah, that's part of what happens in heaven. You get to heaven because of Christ's work, but you're rewarded in heaven because of your work. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 3, if you want to read more about it.
Okay. And then kind of in part of that, but if it's Christ who saves us through his work on the cross, not our work,
Yeah.
and ultimately our eternal fate relies on Christ, not on our works, do our works here have, because they have, it seems like they have no moral bearing because Christ takes all of the punishment for sin.
Oh, no, you might still be punished from the natural consequences of sin. You know, if you start using drugs, that's a sin, but that's going to hurt you, right? If you commit adultery against your wife, that's going to hurt you, right?
But it has no eternal bearing, kind of like if God did.
Oh, no, it
exist.
does have eternal bearing because if you're a Christian, those bad works can cause you to lose rewards in heaven.
But I still end up in heaven.
Yeah, you still end up in heaven. Yeah, because you don't deserve heaven and neither do I. You're there because of grace. But it's just that God rewards people who have done good work for him after they've accepted Christ. So that's what the scriptures teach.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Michael? Hey. Hey, what's your name?
Hi, I'm Anya.
Anya, go ahead.
So I have a question. I am a mom of young kids, and I'm just
Thank
curious.
you, ladies and gentlemen. We need more moms of young kids. Go ahead, Anya.
I'm just curious what your advice would be to parents, how to raise bold young Christians.
How
in
old are they
this
right now,
economy.
Anya?
They're very, very little. So
Okay.
they're all toddlers.
Okay. And you're
I guess
thinking about
what
sending them
advice
back
or-
right now, aren't you?
No, what advice or resources would
Okay,
you
yeah.
have for
Well, we have
parents?
resources down to the second grade, and you need to teach kids very young the truth. In fact, there's Doug Axe, who's a scientist who wrote a book called Undeniable about some of what we've seen here with regard to fine-tuning and also biology. He says that design is undeniable even in young kids who are brought up by atheists. In other words, young kids, when they see a butterfly, they're like, Mom, Dad, who made that? Or a hummingbird. Who made, right? They immediately know there's got to be a cause. They have to be talked out of it by their atheist parents. What you want to do is you want to take that intuition, which is a correct intuition, and enhance it and affirm it because it's true. And you want to teach your kids very young what the truth is, but not just what the truth is, why it's true. So we have a course for 6th to 8th graders in logic. It's called Train Your Brain. And we even tell parents to take it because it's written for 6th to 8th graders. So parents understand it. And so we've had a whole bunch of middle school kids or 6th to 8th graders come through this course, and they learn better how to think. Some of the things we talked about at the top of the hour when we were talking about, self-defeating statements. Here's the problem, though. If you put your kids through this, they're going to become impossible to live with because they're going to say, hey, Mom, that's a genetic fallacy. Hey, Dad, slippery slope, ad hominem attack, But teach them very young. And our website can help you do that, crossexamine.org. You can click on store, you can click on online courses. Teach them very, very young. And my wife was so good, especially at this. She would teach our kids about everything at the appropriate age. You might even think a little bit early. My friend Katie Faust, who, Katie, up in Seattle, she wrote a book called How to Bring Up Conservative Kids in a Woke City. And she says, it's better to tell your kids about these hard issues, whether it's transgenderism, LGBTQ, sexual issues, all these things. It's better to tell them a year too early than 5 minutes too late. You want to be the person that your kid goes to when they have a question. And in order for that to happen, you need to talk about these things very, very early. My wife used to say this to our 3 sons. She would say, any girl you have sex with, you've given permission to murder your baby. She's right. The man has no say in it. So choose wisely, Skywalker. Right? I mean, she would talk about any issue with them, and I would too, but she was really good at that. So start young, talk about every issue, have them come to you as the expert. And then when they get into high school, by the time they get into high school, they're thinking for themselves. They'll rely on you for advice, but most of the teaching's over then. But you can still talk to them about these issues. And if you've grounded them, chances are they're going to stay with the truth. They can still walk away if they want to, but they'll stay with the truth. If they start to walk away, I always ask people this. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If they hesitate or say no, I know it's not a head problem, it's a heart problem. And most of the time it is a heart problem. Most people, if I ask that question, they'll say, no. Because they don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. They want to be God over their own lives. So they're not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. And they're just going to do whatever they think is going to make them happy. That's why you should ask that question.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you for
thank
being
you.
here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking the question. Hey, what's your name?
Hello, I'm Matthew.
Hey, Matthew, go ahead. Matthew means gift from God. Here he is.
Yeah. So I guess I want to start by reviewing what you described earlier. Just that most of your arguments for God acknowledge that they don't necessarily prove that the Christian God is the God that those arguments prove exist. You would agree with that, but that some of the things that they show, and then through some of the other aspects, you can kind of show that they align. But I guess, and I'm agnostic, so I that distinction is very important to me. And I guess my question is...
So wait. So Matthew, the distinction was that the arguments I gave, you're saying, don't necessarily prove the Christian God? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that a lot of the...
Yeah, I agree, because you need
So,
evidence for Jesus to see if this is the Christian God. However, it's congruent with the Christian God to this point. Go ahead.
So, and I guess I want to ask, particularly starting at the morality question, because the creation, all of those first ones, a God could, I guess, exist with a different moral framework, pretty much, So my question is, if morality is self-evident, which you quoted Thomas Jefferson saying, then if the morality that we experience, as in that self-evident morality that we learn, the intuition that kids have, if that seems to disagree with our interpretation of the Bible at this in the modern day, and therefore of the Christian God and of the Christian idea of morality. How does that, wouldn't that in some ways, perhaps disprove the Bible or show that it doesn't accurately seem to describe morality or that interpretation of the Bible?
Well, you'd have to give me an example in order to...
Yeah, so if through, intuition or self-evident experience, it seems that homosexuality is not an evil, but it is described to be such in many interpretations of the Bible, not all interpretations of the Bible at this point, but that is something that, to many it would seem self-evident that that is not an evil, and our laws would reflect it at this moment. But it is described as such in many interpretations of the Bible. And so my example would be saying that I think that those interpretations are therefore wrong.
Okay. The issue here then is, what is the standard? Are our intuitions always correct?
That's complicated, but I guess if they're not always correct.
Okay.
But to some, if morality is self-evident, then they must somewhat.
Okay, but not all
approximate it.
morality is self-evident. When Jefferson says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, among life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those were generalities. They then need to be applied to specific cases. And when Jefferson says that, and we say there's a natural law out there, that doesn't mean every single moral issue is clear as a bell. You can still have moral conflict. However, if just some moral issues are clear, then God exists. That's what that says. Now, if we want to talk about homosexuality from a natural law perspective, leave the Bible aside from it for just a second. A natural law perspective looks at the design of the way things, or the way human beings have been designed. And it's quite obvious that men were designed for women and women were designed for men. And the reason we're here at all is because of that relationship. A human being, whether a male or a female, can do anything alone except procreate. They need one another. So the ground of civilization is the biological two-parent family. Without that, we don't even have a civilization. And everybody, whether they have different sexual desires than heterosexual desires, every one of those people came from that relationship. And by the way, every one of us, regardless of our sexual orientation, so to speak, is oriented toward bad behavior. It's called depravity. We know the right thing to do, but a lot of times we don't want to do it. And just because people have attractions to do certain things, that doesn't mean that the actions from those attractions we ought to do. In fact, some people put it this way, that the principled restraint of destructive desires is called civilization. We all have desires we ought not act on. So the question is, what is the right way to act, not feel, but act sexually? Obviously, let me put it this way. What would happen if everybody in society lived faithfully in a biological two-parent family? What would happen to society? Everything would be improved. Crime would go down. Abortion would go down. Welfare would go down. Emotional pain would go down. Fatherlessness would be non-existent. The biggest driver of crime in America is fatherlessness. So many things would be better. Next question. What would happen if everyone lived faithfully in a same-sex relationship? We would be gone in a generation or two. Now, I'm not saying that a law that allowed a same-sex relationship would cause this. I'm simply pointing out that when you look at the results of those two relationships, they're not the same. And you treat equal things equally, you don't treat unequal things equally. So one of the mistakes we've made in our country is to equate different relationships as if they're the same. The man-woman relationship is a different relationship than a man-man or a woman-woman relationship. If it wasn't, nobody would be arguing for same-sex marriage. The very reason people want same-sex marriage is because they know they don't want to be in an opposite-sex relationship, which is what traditional or natural marriage is. So if you just look at the design of the way things are, it's quite obvious that a heterosexual relationship is the way we were designed, even though we may have attractions to do other things. Does that make sense?
I guess some of the arguments, some of the arguments, like for example, like taking it to the extreme, those effects are real. But I guess I wouldn't say that, for example, the legalization of homosexual marriage is the reason for, I guess, the nuclear family.
No, you're absolutely right. You know what is, Matthew? It's heterosexuals that bought into the romantic basis of marriage, the feelings basis of marriage, rather than the covenant basis of marriage. In fact, the reason when you get married, you have vows. Why do you have vows? Because you know that you put two broken people in one relationship, there's going to be trouble. You don't need vows when you're all lovey-dovey, right? You need vows when you wake up after 10 years and you go, you again. Why did it have to be you again? That's when you need the vow. But we've bought into the idea that when you no longer have these feelings of lovey-doveyness, you're out of love and therefore you can find somebody else. And so it became a feelings-based relationship rather than a vow or covenant-based relationship. And when same-sex marriage people came along, they said, hey, we've got feelings for one another. If that's the basis of relationship, why can't we have it too? And guess what? If that's the basis of relationship, sure, why not? The problem is the foundation of civilization is the biological two-parent family which brings forth children. And if there's no institution devoted to children, that's a disaster. The institution devoted to children is natural marriage. And mothering and fathering are different, and everyone knows it. In fact, I submit to you that there are probably half the people in this room right now have been scarred by divorce. Your parents got divorced, and you thought it was your fault. And you're scarred by it. We made divorce too easy. You know, it's the only relationship where the person who wants to get out of the contract can get out without consequence. Isn't that ridiculous when you think about it? So yeah, I agree with you, Matthew. It's been heterosexuals who have cheapened marriage to the point that it's no longer about children. And if it's no longer about children and just about romantic feelings, why not everybody?
And I guess to go back to the idea of, like you mentioned, liberties is this, like these self-evident liberties. So if there's anything that's self-evident, I guess, is that like liberties that can exist in a like functioning society without, like that society collapsing, I guess. And I think that, homosexuality at least, could exist like in a functioning society, like be a liberty that could be granted without, societal collapse. And I guess, like, I think that is maybe enough to say that it is like a, fits within that idea of like a self-evident liberty. And
yeah, the problem is, if you look at history, that doesn't bear itself out. The fall of the Roman Empire fell from within, not from without. Who is it? J.D. Unwin, who did all of those surveys of previous civilizations, found that most of them fell because they became obsessed with all sorts of different sexual practices, which broke up the family, which led to a breakup of the society. So if you look at the sociological studies, it's not even debatable that the biological two-parent family is the most basic form of government and civilization. If we cheapen that, nothing else really matters. But thank you, Matthew. If I gave you a book, would you read it?
Sure.
Would you?
I mean,
Maybe? Yes or no? I'll give it to you if you say yes.
Sure.
Boom! All right. Thank you, brother. Hi, what's your name?
Brianna.
Hey, Brianna, go ahead.
Okay, so this is going to be more of like an opinion thing because I've asked a few other Christians the same question, and I've just been kind of collecting these opinions. But a lot of people aren't Christian, right? So if you're trying to explain to someone why the Lord is real, how would you explain that to someone?
Well, there's a difference between knowing something's true and showing something's true. You may know the Lord is real because you have the witness of the Holy Spirit, but you can't show that to somebody else. In fact, most of the people throughout history have come to the Lord by trusting in Him, and they didn't know all this evidence. They had intuitions there had to be a creator because there's a creation. They knew that, yeah. But they didn't have all the evidence. And they've come to the Lord because they had the witness of the Holy Spirit. They could know it was true, beyond a reasonable doubt, without being able to show it's true. So how do you show it's true? You can go through some of the steps we're going through here. You can point out that truth exists, that there's evidence that God exists, there's evidence that therefore miracles are possible, and there's evidence that the documents that we have in the New Testament and other data from non-Christian sources and archaeology and these kind of things show you that Jesus really did exist, predict, and accomplish His own resurrection from the dead. And if that's the case, then Jesus is God. And if Jesus is God, whatever He teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament as the Word of God, and He promised the New Testament. So that's kind of the macro view at 50,000 feet to go through and show why somebody actually believes. But I might, if I'm talking to somebody, ask them, do you believe in truth? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in miracles? Do you believe The New Testament's telling the truth, and see where they are. You don't have to go through all those steps if they already say, oh, see, I know God exists, and just start from wherever they are. Does that make sense? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, what's your name?
It's Owen.
Oh, Owen. Yeah, from yesterday. How you
Yes.
doing, Owen? He goes to Evangel.
Yes, I do.
Church. Go ahead, sir.
So I used to be a man of science without God in my life, and
Uh-huh.
then I made God on my life with science being the prime supporter.
Yep.
And Revelation doesn't really make sense to me, and I feel like it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So I'm curious, since you said time is finite, what's your opinion on the end times scientifically and biblically, and how do they connect?
Well, scientifically, there's a whole field called eschatology, not just biblically, not just theology, but science knows, due to the second law of thermodynamics, that unless someone intervenes, this whole show is going to go to heat death, that we're ultimately just going to run out of gas. That's why the idea that you can live forever in this physical format that we're in right now with these laws of nature and with our fallen state is false. They know that we're ultimately going to go to heat death. So eschatology is a scientific endeavor as well as a theological endeavor. So the book of Revelation, yeah, there's been a lot of different views on that. I actually have a book called 4 Views of Revelation, and when people ask me, what's your eschatological view, I say, I'm not on the planning committee, I'm on the welcoming committee. I know Jesus is coming back, and when he comes back, I'll welcome him. But I do not think that God intended for us to figure out when he's coming back. In fact, he didn't intend for us to know when he was coming the first time. This is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. He says, if the powers of this world knew, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, about these things, these Old Testament prophecies, and they could put them all together, they never would have crucified the Lord of glory. Satan thought killing Jesus was the solution. He didn't know that killing Jesus was actually his defeat. And I think the same thing is true in Jesus' second coming. He says, no one knows the day, the hour, the times, nor the season. I'm going to come like a thief in the night. Yet I still see people saying, oh, he's coming, it's soon, he's coming. Whoa! If Jesus doesn't know, you don't know. And the reason Jesus wants us to keep it unknown to us is so we'll always be ready. I mean, if he told us, I'm coming back in 2034, what would we be doing? I got time. I'll just live as I want to live. In 2033, I'll start running up the credit cards. And then I'll repent at the last minute and be with Jesus. No, you always have to be ready. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at the book of Revelation. I think that as you get to the final chapter, we win in the end, however it's going to pan out. I don't take a firm view on eschatology. I got people who are friends that are smarter than me and know the original languages, and they come to different conclusions on eschatology, so I just know we win in the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a follow-up question. So for the non-believers, I was curious to ask, what does it mean to be ready for the end times?
For non-believers?
Yes. Because I might know what it means to be ready for the end
Okay.
times.
Let me say this. Forget when God is going to come back and end the whole show. Everyone in this room is more certain your individual show is going to end at some point in the next several decades. Nobody in this room is probably going to be alive in 100 years. You know with more certainty your show is going to end than you know when Jesus is coming back. So why are you spending so much time trying to figure out when Jesus is coming back? Because either you got to make your decision before either one of those two things happen. Because as C.S. Lewis says, once the author walks out on the stage, the play is over. Your choice, your time to make a choice whether to follow Christ or not is now. While you're still breathing. So I don't concern myself with when Jesus is coming back, because I'm probably going to be punched out of here before he comes back, although maybe not.
Right.
But I know if Lord gives me another couple of decades, great, or I could drop dead tomorrow trying to get to Marquette. Could happen. Didn't think my friend Charlie would be gone. Thank you, Owen.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. What's
Hi,
your
my
name?
name's Nico.
What's your name?
Nico.
Nico, go ahead.
So to give some context first, I think it was about a month or two ago, there was like a really bad snowstorm. I know, crazy, right? But
Yeah, who'd have thunk it?
So yeah, there was a bad snowstorm, and then on the news I saw there was a crazy pileup, like a car pileup, really bad accident. And then like I was driving the same day me and my family were driving, so my mom said, thank God, God protected us. Like, okay, so what about the people that got hurt in that accident? Like, so what am I supposed to think in that? Or like, is there even a point in praying for protection if like, there's probably someone in there that prayed, God, keep me safe today, and then that happened. So
Yeah, well,
should
we
I
were
think of?
driving into Utah Valley University. Charlie said, Frank, pray. So I did. Prayed for safety. 30 minutes later, he was dead. What do we say about that? What we say about that is that God is sovereign, and he told us to pray, but sometimes his answer is no. And with every event, there's always a ripple effect. Charlie left this world too early from our viewpoint, but there's always a ripple effect that comes from every event. Every event ripples forward to affect trillions of other events and billions of people. If we were to bring back Charlie today and say, Charlie, because of you being murdered, 100 million people that Sunday heard the gospel from several people, from the president on down. And the last number I saw as of November, 1.2 billion people have seen some of that memorial service. If thousands or maybe even millions of people became Christians because of your murder, would you accept that? Would you stay dead?
Okay.
And he'd say, of course, that's what my life was about anyway. I wouldn't want to leave Erica and my kids, but I see that God's hand is in this. There's always a ripple effect. In Charlie's case, it's been a tsunami. I mean, there's never been in history one event where more people have heard the gospel than that event. So we don't always know why God allows certain things to happen, but we're told to pray. We're told to be in communion with him. And we're supposed to pray his will, not our own. If it is your will, please keep us safe. But it might not be. Some of us may die driving home tonight. Could happen. Make your decision now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Joe.
Joe, go ahead.
So I have two things.
Uh-huh.
The first, as a Christian and a young earth creationist, I heard some things about an argument against Christianity, or I guess creationism.
Right.
I guess on a lighter note, starlight type stuff. If we have stars that are so far from Earth that it'd take billions of years for that light to travel to Earth, then how is the Earth that young?
Yes, and this is why, well, first of all, when people ask me how old is the universe, I say I'm absolutely convinced that it's at least 64 years old. I'm going to throw my mom in there, it's at least 88. Hi, Mom. Christians are going to argue over how old the universe is. But let me ask you this when it comes to the first verse of the Bible. What does the first verse of the Bible say?
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
That's right. And heavens and the earth meant the whole universe. There's no Hebrew word for universe. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, when did God create the heavens and the earth? In the beginning. Does it say when the beginning was? No. What does the next verse say? And the earth was formless and void. Wait. We've gone from creating the whole universe, and now we're suddenly talking about the earth. How long did that take? Doesn't say. The days don't begin till verse 3. And when you get there, you see the sun is already created. You got days before the sun's created. You go, well, how can that be? This is why John Lennox, who wrote the book 7 Days That Divide the World, the guy from Oxford I mentioned earlier, said that in his view, the Bible leaves the age of the earth indeterminate. In other words, the purpose of the text is not to tell us how old the universe is. The purpose of the text is to tell people who were wandering through the desert after 400 years in Egypt, to tell them who the true God was. Because remember, the Bible is not written to you, it's written for you. Genesis was written to people who had just spent 400 years in bondage in Egypt, and they're walking through the desert. They're not asking the questions we're asking. They're not walking through the desert going, I wonder how old this place is. That's not their question. Their question is Yahweh the true God, or all the stories about the Egyptian gods the true gods? And it turns out that some scholars are now recognizing that Genesis 1 is a polemic, meaning a corrective to the Egyptian creation stories. Because in Egypt, they had these pre-existing gods that just exist in the universe already. They're not explained. And they have to fight one another to create and bring order to chaos. Moses comes along, he says, that's not right. God doesn't fight anyone. He's outside the universe. He just speaks, and he brings order to chaos. So Genesis 1 appears to be a corrective to the Egyptian creation story. Now, of course, there are different views on the age of the universe. If you want two different views, John Lennox has that book, 7 Days That Divide the World, right? Ken Ham has his books that try and talk about how the universe is young. You can evaluate it and figure it out for yourself. But remember, God has created two revelations. We know the revelation we call his word. What's the other revelation? His works. You can't understand the word without understanding his works. Why? Because you can't understand what words mean unless you know grammar and you know logic. You can't understand cause and effect unless you have some idea. Or you can't understand God. Like if the first verse says, in the beginning, God. Well, God's not even introduced. You have to have some idea that there's a being out there who's a cause, who creates, right? You have to have grammar, logic. These are all things that you bring to the text, also the natural world around you. In fact, years ago, my friend Richard Howe, who teaches at our seminary, Southern Evangelical Seminary, ses.edu, that's where I went, and he is a young earther too, but he was having a conversation with Ken Ham, and he asked Ken, he said, Ken, just from the Bible, how do you know that the earth goes around the sun and the sun doesn't go around the earth? And I don't think Ken ever answered the question, because you don't know from the Bible alone. You have to bring his works into it to figure out that when you look out there, you do realize it's better explained by the sun being stationary and we're going around the sun. But you don't get that from the Bible. What you get from the Bible is using observational language, just like we do all the time. I mean, we're at Michigan Tech, right? This is a technical STEM school, but I guarantee you that when you talk about the sun coming up and going down, you'll say sunrise and sunset. You won't say earth rotation will become apparent. Because the Bible expresses things just like we do in everyday language. But you could only know that, that the Bible's doing that if you had the evidence from outside the Bible. And we bring evidence from outside the Bible all the time to know what the Bible says. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Oh,
yeah, one more? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's just something that he was asking for resources, because recently I've been looking into like the Bible was textual criticism stuff.
Yes.
I was curious if you had resources specifically about that.
Textual criticism.
Yeah.
Yes. A book by Peter J. Williams called Can We Trust, I think it's called Can We Trust the Gospels? You want to get that book. Also, anything by Dan Wallace. Dan Wallace is a retired professor from Dallas Theological Seminary. I've had him on my podcast a few times. You can go back in the archives and look for that. Dan Wallace, Peter J. Williams. There's a couple of gentlemen, I want to say, at Phoenix Seminary. Peter Gurry is one of them. I'm trying to think of the other guy. Check those names out.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Hey, great shirt.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Scott.
Scott, go ahead, sir.
And I'm going to call a little bit of an audible here. Kind of piggybacks off the last question about the age of the earth and creation. And just trying to understand your view. You don't take a young earth position, but what is your position on a historical Adam?
Oh, I think Adam was created from the dust, just like it says.
Okay.
That makes a lot more sense. Natural law can't create living things. We know that. How are you going to get a living thing from the four natural forces? What are the four natural forces? Gravity, strong and weak nuclear forces, not a woman scorned, no. And electromagnetism. Atheists have to figure out how those four natural forces working on dead matter gave us a living thing. Four natural forces can't do that. Life is the product of intelligence, not only in the DNA, but in so many of the other mini machines that are even in a cell or even in our bodies. These are created things. So Adam was created out of the dust.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because I know there's a lot of people that try to bring evolution in with that intelligent design that God used evolution to create. And I think there's a huge problem with that.
I do too.
Because that makes death, millions and millions of years of death and evolution would result in us, which God called good, as opposed to Adam sinning, bringing death into the world. It would completely invert God's relationship and our relationship to
Right,
sin.
but in their defense, on that point anyway, Romans 5:12 does not say death came to all life through Adam. It says death came to all men through Adam. So there could have been death before that fall. I mean, remember, there was a fall before the fall of Satan. Okay? So there could have been animal death prior to Adam's sin.
Well, I think the first death would have even been in the Garden of Eden when the Lord clothed Adam and Eve with the skins. That would have been the first death.
Could be. Or there could have been previous animal death prior to that too.
The text doesn't say.
Well, yeah, but Romans 5:12 is what I'm saying, doesn't say that death came to all animals through Adam's sin. Death came to all men through Adam's sin. But yeah, I don't think macroevolution works. We cover that a lot in the book Stealing from God and even the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist book. In other words, it's not just that we lack a natural explanation for life, but there are things about life that require intelligence. Let me just give you a couple of things. DNA, right? If you're walking along the beach and you see John loves Mary in the sand, what do you immediately assume? Waves made that? Crabs came out of the water? No, you'd go, hey, that's got to be a John or a Mary or some intelligent being did that. Well, what's John loves Mary? Maybe 15 letters? Do you know in every one of your cells, there's a John loves Mary that's 3.2 billion letters long? If John loves Mary requires intelligence, doesn't a message 3.2 billion letters long require one? Of course. There's also something known as irreducible complexity, that you can't change a living thing gradually and still have function. All the parts need to be in one place in working order for you to have function at all. And Michael Behe has done some great work on this. So you can't gradually change one thing into another thing unless you have intelligence to change out the parts at the right time and in the right place. And another problem is the fossil record. The fossil record does not comport with gradualism. We see the Cambrian explosion, by their dating, happened over 500 million years ago in a geological instant. There's no fossil precursors to these phyla that just come out of nowhere. In fact, even Richard Dawkins says it looks like they were created. Yeah. And then, of course, epigenetic information, which is not DNA, but it's the structure, the physical structure of a living thing. You can't get a new body plan by mutating epigenetic information. That's not how you get a new body plan. And you can't get it by mutating DNA, because DNA doesn't give you a new body plan. You need the epigenetic information to change. This is all from Stephen Meyer. I'm standing on his shoulders to say this right now. It's not my expertise, but his. And this is why 10 years ago in London, Darwinists called a meeting of the Royal Society. The Royal Society, a very august scientific organization that had as its members years ago Isaac Newton, people like that. And they got together in November of 2016 and said, we need to find a new theory of macroevolution because the current theory doesn't work. The Darwinists are saying this. They know that DNA doesn't give you a new body plan. Mutating DNA doesn't give you a new body plan. And yet you have some people in the church saying we ought to consider evolution. The Darwinists are saying it's dead. Outside of that, I don't care. Go ahead. Does that make sense?
Very good, thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Hi. So I just had a question that one of my atheist friends has asked me before. He asked me, in the Old Testament, God commanded the Israelites to kill other armies and commit supposedly horrible acts. I think one of them he brought up specifically was God told the Israelites, it was either the Canaanites or the Midianites, to first of all kill the men in the army, but then also enslave the women and children, I believe.
Yeah, you need to ask him the context of that, because I guarantee you what he's saying there is out of context. But
yeah,
which one do you want to talk about?
Just in general, like how is God commanding the Israelites to do stuff like that morally right?
Okay, well, first of all, let's just go through it in order here. First of all, when atheists bring this kind of stuff up, I always ask them that if there is no God, why is any Old Testament atrocity wrong? Right? Because as we said before, if there's no God, nothing's ultimately right or wrong. There's no standard. It's just one person's opinion against another. But if the atheist then says, okay, let's assume for the sake of argument God does exist, why would he do this? Fair question. Next point, is God arbitrary or does he give reasons for judging people in the Old Testament?
He gives reasons.
Of course he gives reasons, right? It's judgment. These people are being judged for their sin. And in fact, what they were doing is they were sacrificing their children to the pagan god Molech. They'd heat this fire up under this metal god and then put their babies on the arms of this molten hot idol, and the babies would scream as they sizzled to death. Plutarch, a Greek writer in the 1st century, talks about this too. He says, the drummers in the town would beat their drums more loudly so the parents couldn't hear the screams of their own children. You know, at every college campus I go to, somebody stands up and says, if there is a good God, why doesn't he stop all the evil in the world? Here's an instance in the Old Testament where God wants to stop the evil and the atheists are complaining about it. So why complain that God doesn't stop evil, but then complain when he does? Also, is God committing murder by ending lives on earth? Is he? No, God by definition can't commit murder. If God is the creator of life, he owns life, and he's the only one that can resurrect it. So it's up to God when we die. We can't do what God does. In fact, we have a phrase in our society. It's called, don't play God. What does that assume? It assumes that God can do things that we can't. If God wants to kill somebody, he can. He can do that for whatever reason he wants. Also, God has the right to usher people into the next life, whether they are 2 years old or 82 years old. If Christianity is true, people don't die, they just change location. They go from this life to the next life. And finally, the Old Testament theocracy was unique and temporary. It was not the ideal for all time, but the means to a promised new covenant. In other words, God was getting the promised people in the promised land to bring forth the promised Messiah, and he warned the people in the land who were going to pollute the purity of Israel to get out of the land, and when they didn't, God either drove them out or he ordered the Israelites to kill them. But as Paul Copan points out, Paul Copan is a scholar who wrote this book, Is God a Moral Monster? That God was concerned with sin, not ethnicity. In fact, as we read in the Old Testament prophets, they with God were more angered about Israel's disobedience, and they threatened divine judgment on Israel or Judah more than any of the other pagan nations. In fact, what happened to the people that worshiped the golden calf at the base of Mount Sinai? 3,000 of them were killed that day. They were Israelites. This is called judgment. Also, Copan points out that much of the language in the Old Testament, like wipe everybody out, exterminate them, kill them all, the women, the children, everybody. He points out that when you read that, like an example is Deuteronomy 7, it says wipe everybody out, kill them all. The very next verse says, and then don't intermarry with them. What? How could you intermarry with people that had just been wiped out? Copan is pointing out that this is exaggerated hyperbolic language that is common in the ancient Near East. That you would say, just like we would in a sports situation, we annihilated them. Really? They no longer exist? This is the kind of language that the Old Testament used. It didn't mean that every single person was killed. And Copan goes into a lot of detail in his book on that, so if you want to go further, get that.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi. So I want to go back to the cosmological arguments. And I've been thinking a little bit about this, so I'm just curious on your thoughts. Chance, as you kind of loosely defined it, is statistical probability. Is that correct?
Well, chance, when scientists often use it, is just a word that means we don't know, right? Assuming we have these four natural forces,
yeah.
What are the chances this would happen? And by the way, where do the four natural forces come from? They come from a lawgiver. So they don't get rid of the need for God anyway, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's good. My thought is, how could you even begin to reason if chance is brought up by reason? How can you even begin to reason that there's something that can happen outside of a creator with this word chance? Because chance in and of itself is a logical thought process, is it not? So if in the beginning there was nothing and then something, and we're saying that chance brought that about.
Yeah, I don't think many atheists would go that route. I don't think they would say, well, just by chance it appeared.
Okay.
Although I will say this, Sean Carroll, who is a cosmologist and an atheist, I was just listening to him today talk about this. He actually said that the universe is just here, stop asking questions about it. What? This guy's supposed to be a scientist and he tells us to stop asking questions about why it's here? So it seems to me that he has some sort of allergy or resistance to anybody suggesting that God could be the cause.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right.
And I'm sure many of us Yoopers reflect this sentiment, but it's not often that someone comes up here and speaks and comes out of this out-of-the-way place. So first of all, I appreciate it. If there's any chance to have others come, like Cliff Connectley or anyone else, to come up here and talk to us, that'd be awesome.
Oh, I'll ask Cliff if he wants to come up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cliff's
I really
great.
appreciate it.
But,
yeah.
you know, Cliff is outside. You sure he's going to want to come up here? Huh? Just come in the fall?
Yeah, just come in the fall, yeah.
Like the very first week of September? Before the snow falls in the second week?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's about right.
Hey, Cliff, if you're out there, you need to come to Houghton.
Yeah, again, really appreciate you coming all the way up
All
here,
right.
especially in the winter.
God bless you. Thank you. Well, you can thank Pastor Levi at Evangel Church, because he organized it, and Lisa and all those folks there. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Hi. So I've tried to share the gospel multiple times with different people throughout my life, and none of them have necessarily gotten saved right away or at all, as far as I know. So do you have any pointers on how to share the gospel?
Just because they haven't gotten saved yet doesn't mean you didn't plant a seed, right? Because the Apostle Paul says, some plant, some water, God gives the increase. So just be faithful. You don't have to bring somebody to the foot of the cross with every conversation. In fact, it's more like it's gardening rather than harvesting. You have to garden a long time before you harvest something. And that's what you're doing. So just be a friend to them and just ask them questions. I think asking questions is great. Like, do you believe in God? Why or why not? Why do you think God exists or doesn't exist? What do you know about Jesus? What do you think Christianity is about? Are you interested in this kind of thing? If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? See what they say. So just be faithful in that regard. Don't worry as much about the results as the fact that you're talking to people about it. God will bring the increase. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Ty.
Hey, Ty.
Today I'm here with my fiancée, Emily.
Hey, Emily.
And she's over here with the phone.
Okay.
And I've been a Christian for 3 years now, and I've wrestled with the idea of the reality of hell and God's judgment in that regard. And I've had some distant family members and a couple friends pass away in the past few weeks. And talking about hell is something that I feel like we should always talk about with a tear in our eye, is what I've heard. And but I've shed a lot of tears at night just thinking about that, and wrestled with like different views on hell, like annihilationism and so forth. But I think the eternal conscious torment position is what I think is faithful to Scripture.
Yes, agreed.
And I know that it makes sense that if we've offended an eternal God, we deserve an eternal punishment. I understand that in my mind, but just I wrestle with like experiencing God's love and comfort, knowing that that's just a reality, and knowing that God loves those around me as well, like my family members and so forth that have, and I know that we can't know for certain people's eternity. Like, we're not God, we don't know their last moment. But I guess I have no reason to believe that certain people did put their faith in Jesus.
Okay, let's suppose for the sake of argument they didn't. Is hell unjust?
No, it's not unjust.
Okay, so if it's not unjust, why is it problematic?
I don't think it's just problematic. I don't think it's wrong. Like, I don't think God is unjust for doing that. I think my question's more of like an emotional question.
It is. I understand. The issue, though, is that if God is the standard of justice, and He is, and if there are different levels of punishment in hell, just like there are different levels of reward in heaven, because God is just, then whoever is in hell is getting the appropriate, perfect level of punishment for their sin. And their sin didn't just have to do with what they did here. They continue to sin in hell. There's weeping and gnashing of teeth. People are still set against God in hell. So that's why the punishment continues according to this view. So if you look at the closest thing we have in the Scriptures to this, Luke 16, you've got Lazarus, the beggar, being asked by the rich man in Hades, Lazarus, come and put water on my tongue. I'm in agony in this fire, And notice something about this rich man. Number one, he doesn't say he shouldn't be in hell or Hades. He doesn't, he's not repentant. He's still treating Lazarus like he's his servant. And all he says is, go tell my brothers about this place. Not that I shouldn't be here, I got a raw deal. Just tell my brothers about it. And what does Jesus say in the parable? Hey, they have Moses and the prophets. If they don't believe them, they're not going to believe if someone rises from the dead. In fact, it can be emotionally difficult. However, if God is love and is just, nobody's going to be treated unfairly in the afterlife. There's only two things you can get in the afterlife. You can get justice or you can get grace. Either you can pay for your own sin or you can allow Jesus to pay for your own sin. That's it. It's really simple. And some people don't want Jesus. So God lets them go their own way. In fact, let me just tell you something that happened. I was at University of Michigan. This had to be 15 years ago. I was doing a debate with an atheist, Eddie Tabash, and Eddie asked me this question. He said, my mother was a survivor of the Holocaust. She lived a life full of pain and suffering. Toward the end of her life, someone offered her the gospel, but she rejected it, and then she died. Is she in hell right now? And I said, Eddie, I don't know where your mother is now. I don't know if she had a deathbed conversion. But if she didn't repent and accept Christ before she died, then God is too loving to force her into heaven against her will. Because what's the assumption? Everybody wants to go to heaven. That is not true. Who's in heaven? Jesus is in heaven. There have been people running from Jesus their entire lives. What's he going to do in the afterlife? Hey, where are you going? You're with me now. Get over here. That wouldn't be right. You say, well, what's all this business about hell? Well, I used an illustration with the University of Michigan audience. I'll use it with you, ladies. I asked the ladies this question. So, ladies, I'm asking you this question. Ladies, have you ever had a young man pursue you whom you did not want to date? Some of you are going, yeah, and he's sitting next to me right now. He will not leave me alone. Whenever I ask that question, the ladies giggle and the men look at their shoes. They're like, is she looking at me right now? Well, suppose this guy keeps asking you out, ladies. He keeps asking you out, and you finally say, look, I like you, but only as a... Ladies, why don't you just stick the knife in and turn it? Every man has heard the dreaded friend rejection. Gentlemen, I have some shocking news for you. She doesn't even like you as a friend. In fact, if she did, she'd be interested, but she's not. So move on, go to somewhere else. But suppose this guy keeps coming after you, and he finally says, look, I love you so much, I'm going to force you to love me. Ladies, run screaming from the building. Can he force you to love him? No, love by definition must be freely given. So if he truly did love you, what would he do? He would leave you alone. That's what God does for us. He sends us cards, letters, and flowers. He sends us creation. He sends us conscience. He sends us Christ. He sends us the Bible. He sends us Evangel Church. He may send you a missionary. In some Muslim countries now, he's appearing to Muslims in dreams and visions, so much so that they're advertising this on billboards. If you saw the man in the white robe, call this number. If God does all that and you keep saying, no, 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 God will give you up to your own desires. He will leave you alone. You say, what could be so bad about that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know that everybody, regardless of whether they're a Christian or not, experiences some of the common grace of God. We all experience, as rain falls on the just and the unjust, we all experience love, relationships, hope for a future. You know this, right? But I want you to imagine a place where there is no love, where there are no relationships, where there is no hope, where there is no future, where there's just stone cold narcissistic self-absorption. That is Capitol Hill. No. That is hell. You're separated from the ultimate source of goodness by your own choice. And God is not going to force you into his presence against your will. This is why C.S. Lewis famously said there's only two kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, thy will be done, and those who say to God, thy will be done. Or God says to them, thy will be done. So God is going to leave you alone, which is ultimately what hell is. So if some of your loved ones have died and they did not accept Christ, what do you think they would say to you right now, Ty? What would they want? What decision would they want you to make?
They certainly would want me to put my trust in Jesus.
That's the answer, right there, right?
So we have a close friend who's. It's my assumption.
Ty, I'm sorry, but I gotta keep going because we gotta get out of here by 10. So these last two questions are going to be it.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We got to have some time up here too. But thank you. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, mine should be brief. First of all, my name is Josh.
Hey, Josh.
Same. Thanks for coming.
Yes, sir.
From UP, we're not going to get this a lot, but I have a lot of discussions. I like to have a lot of discussions. Not a great debater, but I do like to ask a lot of questions. And one of the questions I ask a lot is, you have male and female species, right? Mm-hmm. How does that evolve with one without the other? I could never wrap my mind around that.
Yeah, because there is no answer. That's exactly right. The evolutionary theory would have to have two species evolving together, both male and female, so they could continue to procreate. That's not. You can't even get one. You're not going to get two.
So that, I assume, is why I don't ever get an answer. Or
because there isn't an answer.
Even a discussion. So
yeah.
The other one is we talked a little bit about it today. Is Mars. Mars is one of those places that they talk about can inhabit life, right? Mm-hmm. If we were here for millions of years, there has to be something there. I mean, if there's so many different forms of life that don't need, they're not delicate. You know, they can survive under great circumstances. Like, why is there not something? You know, like as far like for logical, I'm kind of a
we don't know. It's all speculation. We don't know. But according to what calculations that many scientists have made, Mars doesn't have life on it. Not the kind of life we know. So it's very rare to find all of these parameters that are exactly right, which is one of the reasons we call this the fine-tuning argument. I got to keep moving.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Jordan. My question
Jordan?
has to do with Romans 10 and then Jeremiah, I think 17. You referenced I think it explains the nature of the heart and how wicked it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Romans 10, I think you heard earlier, you talked about the salvation process. So if the heart is wicked, yet the heart is supposed to, in inward confession and an outward allegiance, that heart posture is a little bit perplexing to me. If the heart is wicked, how can it also then choose to...
Because Jesus, or the other part in Jeremiah, I'm trying to think of where it is, maybe Jeremiah 31, I'm going to give you a new heart.
Sure, and I think that's where I struggle when I talk to other non-believers. It's like, okay, I believe this, but it's been given to me, it's a gift. But when is it their part to actually play in that journey to say, God's given me that new heart, now I'm going to profess because I have that new heart?
Well, now you're getting into whether your regeneration happens prior to you deciding or not. This is a Calvinistic question and all that. And we're not predestined to talk about that here tonight.
Do you have resources on that, though? I get your point, but do you have resources to actually maybe delve into that?
Yeah, if you want to get into that, I would go to Leighton Flowers' YouTube channel. It's called Soteriology 101. And he deals with all these issues of Calvinism, Molinism, Arminianism, and all that, and whether you're regenerated before you actually make a choice and that whole thing. I don't think you're regenerated before you make a choice. I think when you make a choice, that's when you're regenerated.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, hey, how come you guys keep adding to the question line? What's your name?
Hi, my name's Skylar. I just have
what's your name again?
Skylar.
Skylar, go ahead.
I just have a super quick question because I know we have to go. But when I was younger, I was really close with God, and I would go to church every Sunday, and I would read my Bible, and I felt like I was doing really good. And I feel like these past few years, I've really drifted away from God, and I made some not very good decisions. And I feel like as a teen, it's really hard managing my relationship with friends and sports and school, and even my relationship with Christ. So my question is, what are some first steps in reforming my relationship with Christ again?
What a great question, Skylar. Thank you for bringing that up. Well, prayer certainly, and Bible reading, but I think you need to get engaged with some fellow believers who are about your age, who you can hold one another accountable. And if you can find somebody a little bit older, further down the road, who can help disciple you, and I think Evangel Church can help with that. Do you go there?
I have gone a few times with my family, yeah,
Okay.
and friends. I have a really good friend actually over there. Her name's Charlotte. She's helped me a lot.
Okay, good. Charlotte? There you go. All right. Well, that's where I would start. You know, Bible reading, prayer, and getting engaged in a church with like-minded people, and maybe finding somebody a little bit further down the road that can help disciple you toward that end. But the most important thing is that you have a desire to do this. That's the most important thing, right? And Rosario here can help you too, because he is connected to that church. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. What we're going to do, if anybody wants a book, we've got some books up here. We'll be up here, and if we can sign them. Actually, my penmanship isn't very good, so my friend Fabio is going to sign all the books for me. Okay? And but we'll be up here, and tomorrow, and for those watching out there, Lord willing, we'll be down at Northern Michigan, and we'll go through, is the New Testament true? We'll go through the evidence for that and the evidence for the resurrection. So if you can tune in there, if you want to come down there, it's open to everybody. So thank you for being here, and thank you for Evangel Church and Pastor Levi and Lisa and all the folks that put this on. Thank you.
For joining us tonight. If you enjoyed this live stream, please hit the subscribe button and be sure to check out these other helpful resources for more information on how to defend the truth of Christianity in this crazy upside down world. Our website at crossexamine.org, the Cross-Examine app for Apple and Android, the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast, all your favorite places on social media, onlinechristiancourses.com, and impactapologetics.com. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the